when we did our dusty pastel base, we started far and worked close. Now the reason is that that's going to be more of a realistic depiction of depth, of visual space, right? So we're going to do exactly the same thing moving forward to add the detail. We're going to start far, work close. You want to make sure that you spray fix your work after you have your base in. And so if you look at the left side, you can see that I have the base already going, right? I'm actually recording, so try to be real quiet, Julia. So spray fix it. That will set the pastel some so that when you go to add detail on top, it doesn't mix as much. It allows for more detail and texture. Make sense? Right? If any time you're frustrated because it won't mix, spray fix it and come back. Okay? There is spray fix on the booth for you to use. Okay? So I'm going to start far and work close. Now, your sky is probably different than my sky. My sky is pretty smooth, right? So I can clean up and define the colors of my sky if it looks streaky. So if your pastels are like mine and they're filthy, make sure you clean them off, right? And then go in and smooth out your sky if it's smooth, right? If you have clouds, which I had a few of them showing off right there, right? I can go ahead and add some texture to fluffy clouds, right? And I can leave it like that, right? I don't have to smudge it or smear it. I can leave the texture. Does that make sense? For my mountains are smooth, but most of you do not have smooth mountains. You have texture, right? So when I am adding color and detail, I always start with the darker color first for detail. So I can take my pastel, this purple that I used to kind of clean up and define the edge. I can use that to kind of add some rocky texture to my mountain. And of course I have nothing to kind of follow, but I kind of look at the picture and try to imply the texture. I don't do all of it. I just want to make it look like it's rock. If it's not this bumpy, I can take my finger. Everyone watch. This is really fancy. I can just tap it and make it a little bit smoother because it's far away. I can do the same thing if I have lighter texture, and I can put that in as well. And then if it's too much, I can tap it down. That makes sense? Okay. For the trees, thank goodness I left a little bit of the trees here. My trees are darker and duller in the distance, and then they get brighter as they come out, but I still have to start with my dark, right? So I'm going to layer in my dark and kind of get some patches of dark color here. Now, if it is not dark enough, I can always darken it. I'm not a big fan of black. Most artists don't use black to darken. Instead, they use dark colors. So I can use like a dark blue to kind of add some more depth into it, and I can mix it in, right, with the dark green, right? And then I can kind of imply the texture that I see, right? So I can use like little dots, I can use little scribbles, right? And then I can start to layer on the highlights. So like the edge of the tree is actually lighter, and I can start to kind of stipple that in on the edges. Notice how some of the sky and the mountains peek in between the trees. That feels more realistic than leaving the bare paper. That makes sense? Right? So I'm not going to show all this, but I'm going to kind of talk it through. To do the grasses, what kind of marks did I use? What did I do? What kind of marks? Little hashes, right? Little hatchy marks, right? So I followed the grasses. I started dark. I actually started close for once, and then I added the light as I went up, right? Layering it already on top of my base. I used stipple, the little dots, for these little rocks. I'm still not quite done there, right? And then for the water, I've got a lot of horizontals. When they're really far away, they're really close together, and as they get closer, they get thicker and farther apart to show depth. Does that make sense? So what I want you to do is have more detail in the foreground than in the background. And I also want to emphasize that this is an impression of a landscape. I want us to look at that and go, hey, that's trees, and that's cloud, and that's grasses. I don't want you thinking it has to be a photo realistic image of your photo. Unlike surrealism, we want to use the reference to imply the texture and the depth, but we don't want it to be a photocopy. We're only spending 5 days on this, right? This is more impressionistic. That makes sense? Okay, so go ahead and if you need to spray fix, go ahead and